Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for a discussion about small business resiliency. I'm Susan Krashinsky Robertson, retailing reporter with the Globe and Mail, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. If you're experiencing technical difficulties at any point, please enter your question into the tech support and Q&A box, and your question will be answered as soon as possible. In terms of audience questions, thank you to those who sent in questions ahead of time. You can also ask a question using the Q&A box on this webcast. We'll take a few of your questions closer to the end of the discussion. Everyone who registered for the webcast will receive a link to the recorded version, so you can view the event again at your convenience. The recording should be ready in about a week. During today's webcast, we'll explore some of the challenges small businesses are facing due to the pandemic and some of the strategies that can help. We have a great lineup of speakers to cover the issue. Let's introduce our speakers. Chris Castillo is Professor of Entrepreneurship with Algonquin College. Chris is a serial entrepreneur and highly regarded small business and entrepreneurship expert. He has started and grown over 10 successful businesses, including a restaurant, coffee shop, internet businesses, automotive repair shop, and a music entertainment company. Next, we have Tricia Chapman, Director of Inside Sales with Purolator. Tricia's passion for the customer experience stemmed from her 14 years at Rogers Communications. At Rogers, she held several senior positions and various leadership roles in customer experience, loyalty, retention, and sales. We're also pleased to have Craig Sheridan, founder and CEO of Legends Hall Supply, a food distribution company in Coquitlam, BC. Before the pandemic, the company had been selling to restaurants and retailers, but quickly pivoted into home grocery delivery, a business that's becoming increasingly important to the company. Last but not least, we have Reddy, co-founder and CEO of Ritual, the app that taps networks of coworkers and colleagues for pickup and pay at local restaurants and coffee shops. Ritual was impacted by the closure of workplaces and restaurants, but has done some interesting work to adjust its business model in response. Thank you all for joining us today. Tricia, let's start with you. Working with Purolator, you and your team were on the ground when physical distancing measures were implemented. What happened to small businesses, and what were some of the first strategies they turned to for survival?
We were there on the front lines when it hit, and a lot of our customers, they didn't know exactly what was going to happen. Was this 2 weeks, 3 weeks? Was this going to be a year? And we quickly pivoted to reach out to all of our small and medium customers to say, what can we do to help you now? And what can we do to help you in your future? And we changed our roles from being how to get a product from A to B to more of a consultant. How do you get yourself on e-commerce? How do you get that product and reach out to your customers? So it really changed us to become more of a consultant and help with the supply chain, because we recognized that we were a B2B company and we needed to help our customers convert to the home, because people didn't want to go out and do curbside or stand in lines, and a lot of places weren't allowed because they weren't essential. So we continue to be consultants with our customers.
And that's a big jump for a lot of small businesses who have never done e-commerce before, right? What were some of the biggest challenges?
Simple things like taking pictures. What should I put on my e-commerce website? How much should I charge? What should how quickly can I get these products to the customers? And how do I advertise that, hey, I'm still here. Your favorite coffee beans that you like roasted, I can deliver to your home. You don't have to, you can support us. And it really helped us be close to the customers. And if we found that it was a proud moment for Purolator to be part of a Canadian culture, that we all work together and help our small business and support our small business, because every time a small business opened, that meant a job or somebody could go back to work. So it was a unique moment, and it was a proud moment for our team.
That's great. And these are mom and pop shops, many of whom, as I said, have never done e-commerce before. What were some of the capabilities that you helped them to implement?
We help them to connect to different platforms like ShipStation or Magento or Shopify through simple plugins. And then we also help them with their web services and just get them to shipping. And just, advice of what we learned from other customers.
Great. That's a great segue into your story, Craig. Your small business, Legends Hall Supply, started off selling food to restaurants and to retailers. And that changed, obviously, when the pandemic hit and the restaurant market declined very rapidly. Can you take us through how you responded? I believe you had to set up an e-commerce platform virtually overnight.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we related in a way to what Tricia worked through in our business. You know, we were a B2B classic distribution business. We had our warehouse, our salespeople, our delivery trucks, and our products. Um, so we really leveraged our current vehicle that was in place, which was all of those things. So, and we said, look, you know, there's a consumer out there who doesn't have access to this product at the grocery store. They don't want to stand in line. And you know, we did have at the time 30 employees that we wanted to make sure that we could continue to keep their jobs. So this was a quick pivot in the wake of COVID, to ensure that we were there for our local community and serving them the food that we had in our back pocket, as well as keeping our staff employed.
And you mentioned earlier, I think, that the home delivery business that you implemented will likely remain part of your core business after this pandemic. Can you tell us about those plans?
Yeah, I mean, early on, we put systems in place that would enable us to, you know, in a way, beta test the model. We weren't sure at the time of the longevity of this, and we knew that there were delivery models in place, but we weren't sure of market share at that time. So as we worked through our initial probably 3 weeks, we really looked at the data and we spoke to our customer, and we wanted to understand what the long term. And at the same time, we had to put some gut into this, and we believe that there's longevity here. So we've invested. We've got a new facility. We've invested in vehicles, people, our product mix. We've added over 350 products in less than a month. So it's been successful, and we're hoping to continue to reap the rewards long term.
That's incredible. Have you slept?
Not much. Days off are few and far between, so it's been crazy, but certainly worth it.
Craig, it's interesting how you were also able to avoid layoffs at this time when a lot of small businesses obviously have been impacted incredibly. In fact, I believe your employee count grew. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so we doubled our employee count, not overnight. We grew into it. The initial challenge was obviously we're still in a food manufacturing and distribution environment, so we had the safety protocols to work through. So those were challenging times. They still are to this day. So that's where the building came in for us to really manage this long term. But as we kind of worked our way into delivering direct to consumer, the challenges that we saw with our staffing was that we needed to bring it on now. We were able to maintain what we currently had with our staffing. There was obviously some attrition that came around anyone with any illnesses at the time, any, they had people coming back from travel and whatnot. So we worked through those. Luckily, there were a lot of our business partners in the restaurant business that were laid off. And so we had a great talent pool to pull from at that time. And they still remain on the team today. So we were really lucky at that point to have great people that we could bring on in a short period of time.
That's amazing. Chris, I want to bring you in here too. You obviously teach entrepreneurship at Algonquin, and you're a serial entrepreneur yourself. We were talking earlier about your Ottawa restaurant. How was the restaurant impacted by the pandemic, and what did you do in response?
Yeah, for sure. So the restaurant was impacted, and what we did is when we were thinking that they were going to do the lockdown, we spoke to the staff and we decided to just close early and start getting prepared for this lockdown. And so we did notice a big impact on our sales because the dining room was closed. So what we had to do was be able to pivot and move towards pushing more online orders, and then that helped us throughout this time.
And you also took advantage of the time that you had. Did you develop a new dish?
Yeah, exactly. So we had some time to be able to improve our systems as we get ready to franchise the restaurant, and we also took time to innovate and create a gluten-free ramen, because we sell ramen at the restaurant, And it was great because it allowed us the time to do things that we were hoping to do before, but we were quite busy. And this gave us some extra time to be able to come up with those innovative dishes. It was great because it kept the staff working as well too. It kept them thinking how we could innovate, and it really felt like a team effort to keep the restaurant open and looking towards the future and the long-term aspect of the restaurant.
That's great. You also have an automotive repair business called Mechanic to You. Can you tell us about that business in relation to the pandemic and physical distancing?
Yeah, for sure. Like my partner and I started that about 11 years ago now, and we just started off as a mobile repair business. So we just drove around and fixed people's cars. About 11 years ago, Ottawa didn't know how to give us a business license for that, but we were able to talk to them about charging us $120 for the year for the license, and we just got going with the mobile. So after about 2 years of running the mobile aspect of the business, then we got ourselves a shop. And throughout the whole time, we've had the automotive car or the van go out to do the servicing of cars, and we also had a shop as well too to be able to bring in the bigger business. So when COVID-19 happened and the lockdown happened, that just enabled us to help out and get going with the and produce the mobile aspect of the business, and to be able to continue to go out and do social distancing, and it allows as well too for as people are at home doing their thing, the mechanic is at their driveway fixing up their cars. So that part of the business came through much more so.
That's great. That's great. Ray, I'd like to get to you now. Ritual is a business that is very intimately tied to the nature of the restaurant industry. It's an app that allows people to order ahead at coffee shops, lunch orders, and so on. What happened when all those office buildings and coffee shops closed down? How did Ritual shift its business model?
Yeah, it's a good question, Susan. So we work with about 10,000 restaurants in North America and in Europe. Our focus is primarily in dense office districts, so that's about 70% of our footprint. And yeah, unfortunately, when offices shut down, we saw, I think there's sort of two stories here. In dense office areas, there's unfortunately no strategy that you can really, the businesses can really make work when offices are locked down and there's physically no one in the financial district, for example. So most of those restaurants were forced to shut down. Even strategies like pivoting to grocery, et cetera, weren't really helpful when there was no one there. So that's what we really saw happen. The vast majority of restaurants in commercial urban areas decided to close down for the first little while. But we saw the opposite happen in residential areas. So with more people being at home, many restaurants that were in residential or mixed use started to actually see an increase in demand and contactless pickup. And I think previously order ahead and digital was about convenience and saving time, and it's now become an essential utility for health and safety because people don't like waiting in lineups and touching payment pin pads unnecessarily is seen as it's obviously a big health and safety issue now. And so we're starting to see in residential areas, we're starting to see like unprecedented demand for contactless pickup and curbside pickup, which are two things that our platform has always supported. And so over the last few months, we've had a real focus on basically following that demand and growing that part of our business, as well as launching new products to support local, increasingly going digital.
That's really interesting. And I think, a question on a lot of people's minds is how long these changes will last and whether we'll ever get back to pre-pandemic habits, like just walking into a restaurant or a store. What's your take on consumer behaviors over the slightly longer term?
Yeah, we kind of broke it up when we talk about this internally and sort of like our internal models and how we're planning the business over the next 2 years. We've kind of broken up into short term, medium term, and long term. Short term is this current lockdown state where, frankly, if you're not selling groceries, you're probably not selling much. Like that has kind of become, with people being at home and not allowed to go out at all. Grocery is really the only category that's winning in a really big way. We think the medium term is going to last a long time. So that's probably going to start.
Ray, you're just breaking up a little bit. If you could let our team address your audio, I think we should have you back online very soon.
Okay.
Oh, there you are. Please continue.
Okay. I was just saying that we operate in Hong Kong as well, and we've started to see Hong Kong has sort of gone through this cycle about 10 to 12 weeks ahead of North America, and so we're starting to see what the world opening up sort of looks like.
Tricia, I'm going to move on to you for 1 second. Can you weigh in on that as well? Purolator is obviously monitoring trends around the supply chain. What are you seeing in terms of the near and longer term future for retail and bricks and mortar businesses?
We have seen a lot of changes in the marketplace and the supply chain, and having to adapt really quickly, both from a health and safety of our teams, health and safety of our customers, and getting products in. There was a time nothing was coming in from China, and now the doors will start opening again. The comfortability of people returning to bricks and mortar, there could be, but it's slowly coming on. We've had our eyes, and our strategy team is focused on all of Europe and China to see if we could get some early stages. But we do think it's going to be a while before any of the common things that we used to do are going to come back in place. So we're trying to be there and pivot with the model as quickly as possible, get more products to the home as the demand needs, and be close to the situation so we can flex in any way we can to support Canada.
And Tricia, in the same vein, what about e-commerce predictions? Now that so many small businesses took the leap to online ordering, will they keep shopping the same way? What does this mean to businesses that aren't yet online?
I think that e-commerce will continue to evolve. We in Canada were actually quite behind the rest of Europe and United States on home deliveries, period. We were anticipating in the next 2 years, 20 to 40% more people going online. We were just, as Canadians, just more happy to go see people, I see. But now I think that we're going to see this e-commerce platform continue to grow. And I do think that some form of storefront, whether it's instead of 3 stores, it's 1, is still going to be there, but you're going to see us evolve more and more to getting everything at home.
Thanks, Tricia. And Ray, I believe we have you back via audio, and you were talking about consumer behaviors in the longer term. What's your prediction about how things will change over the longer term?
Yeah, sorry about that audio issue. You able to hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, we think that from now till about Q2 of 2021, we're going to be living in this what we sort of call the medium term, where there's still going to be social distancing measures. For example, when we talk to a lot of the commercial landlords we work with, they expect that elevator capacity will be reduced for the foreseeable future, and so. In our world, when things continue for 9 or 12 months, they effectively start to become the long term, really. And so we do see things changing once there's a vaccine or a permanent cure, but we don't really think that that's going to happen until the second half of next year. And so our advice to most of our partners is, if you're in an office district, to plan for probably 50 to 60% of office workers to come back. And unfortunately, that means a pretty significant reduction in long-term sales. And so again, our advice to most of them is operational efficiency used to be what mattered when most restaurants had the problem that they had too much demand and had to turn away demand. during their peak times, and we think it's going to be a very different problem for the next 9 or 12 months. And so we really think that prioritizing cost savings and ways to increase sales and giving customers a very convenient way to access them digitally that feels safe is going to be the most important thing to capturing as much sales as possible in the middle term.
Hmm. We've been getting questions from small business owners about how to most effectively use social media to keep awareness high and to engage customers. Craig, I'd like to bring you in on that question. How did you get out the word to customers that Legends Hall was offering home delivery?
Yeah, great question, Susan. So for us, that was our initial platform that we launched from was traditional social media, and we found that Instagram was the most effective for us as a business. I don't know if that's because we're in grocery and there's more imaging and we're telling a story about food and farmers and producers and where product comes from. But that was the initial feedback that we received from the market was, we went from the mid, hundreds to 5,000 in a month. So we found that the traditional forms of social media worked well. And then, I would suggest to anyone who's working direct to consumer that, the focus for us is really engaging the audience. So whether it's all platforms socially, as well as interacting with those that you have connected with initially. So whoever has purchased products or whoever you have as a prospect in your funnel. So whether it's a neighborhood or even, with Ray and targeting specific complexes or buildings, now might not be the time. That's something you may want to park for the future long-term growth. But, certainly marketing for us, social media has been huge and it's going to continue to be. So we're going to double down on that moving forward. There's no doubt.
Chris, I want to ask you about this too. Obviously one of the challenges faced by small businesses is keeping customer relationships strong when you can't be face-to-face. What role did social media play in helping you keep your customers and also maybe even attract new ones?
Awesome. Yeah. So social media has been a great tool for us to be able to communicate with customers and let them know that we are still open. We are focusing more on delivery, and they could definitely call for pickup as well too. We have social distancing measures to ensure that everybody is keeping safe. And so we found that the social media platform and communicating with customers was great. Letting them know about, we just let them know about the new ramen, the gluten-free ramen. We also what we found was really good was thanking them. And we just did a good little post, and we just said, thank you so much for your support during this time. We really appreciate it. And so I just found that social media, again, is great a communication tool for businesses to be able to keep in contact with your customers, keep them engaged, and let them know that you're still open and that you appreciate their service.
That's such a great point. And Chris, that brings to mind a question I have pretty much for all of the panelists, actually. We've seen a surge in people's concern, I think, for their neighborhood businesses getting through this time, a lot of communication directly from those businesses to their customers. Do you think that this is an opportunity for small businesses, that we might be seeing a moment when people really want to support their small local shops? And is there a way that small business owners should be taking advantage of that? Just for expediency, maybe Chris, I'll throw that to you first, but please, everyone else,
Sure.
Feel free to weigh in.
For sure. One of the things that we did at the automotive shop is for a weekend we had a drive-through tire change event. So we promoted that on Facebook and Instagram, and we let people know that on a weekend we would let people drive in. We would change their tires really quickly, and it was a $40 charge, and they would stay in their car while we jacked up their car and changed their tires. We also asked them to donate a non-perishable food item that we were able to take it to the local city here, to the food bank. And so when customers came in and they talked to us, they said that they found this initiative really good because it allowed them to still get their car serviced, get their wheels, tires changed, stay inside, and be able to do a non-perishable food item. And then we had 2 boxes full of food that we were able to deliver to the Barhaven food cupboard here, and they were, of course, very grateful. And the fact that we did that and we called it a drive-through COVID-friendly event, that started to help out with social media as people were talking more and more about it. And so what we did is, as more and more people were coming in, we noticed that a lot of their cars have been not running for a while. And so what we did is, as we looked at the issues that they've been having, I created a social media post that said, some tips for keeping your car going. So if your car is in the driveway and hasn't been moved or driven for a week, we did a post. We recommend people on a weekly basis, take their cars out for a drive for 30 minutes. That keeps the parts lubricated. It reduces a lot of the rust, and it just keeps your car, in shape. And the battery as well keeps charged within that 30-minute drive once a week. So I just found it to be quite a win-win scenario to be able to use that.
Anyone else have any insights on that point? Do you think that there's more of a push to buy local right now? Yes, Trish.
I would say with the impact on the global supply chain and some of the panic buying we saw in the early days, I think it came to a realization that we can't depend on everything coming across the border or coming in from China. So I think that was the realization that a lot of people said, we got to look at things a little bit differently. And then seeing your neighbors not having jobs and seeing places close, I think that also had an impact. And I do think the social media impact in the small communities are really helping all these small businesses get on track and get innovative. And I keep saying it's a Canadian thing, but I think it's just like in a crisis, we want to come together. And I really think this is where we're coming together in the communities, is supporting those small businesses to survive and thrive.
That's a great point. Ray, I'm curious whether you think that there are any strategies that businesses can take advantage of right now to maybe capitalize on people's desire to support small businesses in their community. Do you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, we definitely do. I think this also sort of relates to the previous question. We sort of see the future of local to follow a very similar path as retail. And what we saw over the last 10 years, it's probably a very simple way of dividing up things. There were those who embraced digital and those who didn't. And I think what we're seeing now is anyone who didn't. We saw the carnage in retail, and if you weren't digital first or you didn't embrace digital e-commerce, your retail shop probably isn't doing so well or hasn't survived the last few years. And we think that this is really the pretty crucial juncture in the road for local businesses right now, where those who succeed, like to the question on is there an opportunity, I think there's a massive opportunity. There's going to be very big winners and losers over the next 5 years. And in my mind, it just really comes down to those who realize that the world has shifted to digital in a very big way. And what we're seeing, it's a very similar story again to retail in the sense that large businesses win through their investments in technology. That was true in retail, and we're already seeing it now with food and restaurants, for example. Starbucks has opened up all of their stores, but it's exclusively through mobile order ahead because it's fast and convenient. So, the vast majority of Starbucks stores you can only access digitally. And I think the point of all of this is that I think people want to support local, but not at the expense of convenience or health and safety. And what that means is people for the first time today. So one of the very important products that we partnered with the City of Toronto on, the City of Toronto has a mandate, because I think cities realize this as well. They have a mandate to get something like 3,000 local businesses online in the next few months. What we're seeing is for the first time, 3 months ago, people didn't get out of bed and say, how do I access my local baker or coffee shop digitally? That's just not what they did. They went directly to and walked into the store, they waited in line, and they paid. For the first time today, people are waking up and saying, how do I access this store digitally? How do I do it safely so that I don't have to wait in a long line? And what that means, put very simply, is that your website is getting a lot more traffic than it used to. So if you don't have a website, get a website. There's plenty of easy ways to do that. And if you have one, then make it actionable. And there's many tools that allow people to order ahead or buy from your website, or in some cases your social media is sufficient. If you don't have a website, that's what people are doing. They'll just use your social media handle. So I think the advice is pretty simple, which is if you're not online, you have to get online. And if you are online, make sure you have some kind of a transactional capability where people can actually transact through you, because that is what people are looking for today. And in the old world, it was about real estate location, right? You could succeed by just having the right store at the right place, because people would walk down the street and make a decision on perhaps where, which store they're going to walk into. People are making those decisions online today. So if you don't exist, you're just not part of that decision set. So you've lost before you've even started, right? So I think that's really the advice that that we give all of our partners, and what the work we're trying to do with cities and banks, et cetera, is just try to get as many local businesses online and digitally accessible as possible.
That's a great point. That's a great point. I want to ask a question about government assistance. Ray, Chris, or Craig, anyone feel free to jump in on this. Were you able to access any of the government support programs for small businesses at this time, such as the wage subsidies?
I can answer that briefly. So yes, some of initially the way that the wage subsidy program was designed wouldn't really work for technology companies, but then the government modified it. So I believe we are now eligible for some of the wage subsidies.
Susan, on our end, we didn't qualify for any wage subsidies. There were some municipal, provincial, federal subsidies that had to do with some PPE support, as well as some technology solutions that we were able to take advantage of. But on our end, no, we didn't qualify.
Chris, how about you?
Yeah, on our end with the restaurant, we were able to qualify for the wage subsidy, and that definitely helped.
That's interesting. At this point, I just want to remind our audience that we are going to be taking audience questions in a few minutes. So I'd like to invite viewers to type a question for the panel in the Q&A box on your webcast console. Just before we get to that, Tricia, I want to come back to you. What advice would you give to small business owners wanting to build on their supply chains now that they've established e-commerce or perhaps are about to?
I think that they should ensure that they're also supporting the local communities to get their products and purchase their products, and think about the way maybe we have been dependent on outside sources to be our supply chain. But also I think use your partners and make sure you are close to your customers, because if you're going to home, it's challenging right now. There's a lot of products trying to get to home right now. So they may not get that product the next day, and how do you keep close to them so that they understand, as we continue to evolve this supply chain in general to moving from store to home.
That's
just setting right expectations, I think.
Great. A question for any or all of my panelists here. What advice would you give to other small business owners who are trying to pivot their business, to keep customers, or just to survive through the crisis?
I could talk to that. So a key thing that, just because I also have a consulting company, when I talk with a lot of my clients, I know that the important thing for them to think about is their mental health. And so as entrepreneurs and small business owners, it's very important to think about your mental health and be able to deal with that. So, these are, simple little things that you could do. For example, keeping positive and trying to stay clear-headed and be able to take the time to think, look at your situation, plan ahead. And if you take that approach, then the ideas come to you, and then you are able to then talk to your staff and the people around you to be able to create even more ideas, and be able to keep that fortification of your mental health is important as for entrepreneurs, and then not to be able to look at things all the time as a big a challenge or a burden or a crisis, but be able to flip that around and say, okay, so these challenges that are being brought forward, how can I use that as opportunities to be able to grow? And this is a very important mindset that I think is really required for success. So then you could see the things that are available to you, like technology, like developing a website, like social media. And this will help you be able to meet these challenges. So then you could not only actually survive, but thrive within this situation.
That's a great point. I want to keep some time for audience questions because we're getting quite a few. So I'm going to start with a couple of audience questions. One common one that we're actually getting a lot of is about first steps to setting up e-commerce and other platforms. Which ones are good? Some very basic advice on how to even approach this is a question we're getting a lot of in our box here. I'm wondering if anyone has any thoughts on that.
Well, Susan, we did this. We went through this exercise. It was challenging. First step for us was quite interesting. We put together an Excel spreadsheet and we attached it in PDF form onto a tab on our website, and that's what helped us gather the info that we needed to kind of set off in the journey of e-commerce. My one piece of advice as it relates to setting it up is to really work diligently to understand the information in front of you, to understand your business and how it affects the customer experience from A to Z, and then the operational experience. So there's the front-facing component, and then there's the back-end operational component. So one of the things that we had a challenge with was not only uploading photos and descriptions and payment and the look and the feel of the website, but it was also the back end. So as it related to a picking process, receiving product through our backdoor, stocking, understanding inventory management. So depending on if you're a restaurant, selling a heat and serve meal, or whether it's a takeout meal, or you're selling shoes or scarves, no matter what, I think you have to understand all those processes. And we had to work through a couple iterations of our website. We ended up with Magento as our platform. We believe that we're set up for success because of the long-term components of it, but we still think that there's going to be another iteration. So that was our experience.
Any other thoughts or advice on that question? Yes, Tricia.
We actually our marketing team put together a site on Purolator just to help with these type of questions. I do agree with what he was saying before. You need to make sure it's the right front-end experience and back-end experience to make sure your shipping experience and everything happens well from the customer, for the customer and yourself. We do have different partners, as I've mentioned, but we do have a whole how-to kit on our website just to help the customers you guys get set up so that we can make you successful. So that's what we put together because we were getting a lot of questions, and it's hard to tell people what we think you should do. It is what is best for you and how ease of use for you as a small business owner.
And Tricia, where can people find that on your website?
I was just going to, it's under our resources for small to businesses, COVID-19. So we can send that link out, but it's listed right off our website.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on that topic before I move on to another audience question?
I'd just like to echo, it's Ray, I'd just like to echo one thing that Craig said, which is it's something to take seriously. I think that for a lot of local businesses, sometimes the attitude can be, this is an annoying thing that you have to deal with and like another task on the task list. But I actually think the way you should think, like if you're, the way that I often will position this to our partners is for many of them, digital can make up more than 50% of their sales. It did pre-COVID, and it's at a point right now where it can easily, I mean, in some cases, it's 100% of their sales if walk-ins aren't allowed. And so what I would equate this to is think about the amount of time you would spend on choosing a store location and your fixtures and the investment you're willing to make on a physical store, and think about this as something that's a serious part of your business going forward. You don't necessarily just want to do the first thing that comes along or the cheapest thing. You want something that you think is a platform that's going to be around, that's going to grow with you and grow with your business. And so, again, it's hard to recommend. There's not one size fits all or a single solution that can work for every business. But I think the point is, there's no substitute for you doing your own research and taking the time to figure this out. You can't just like outsource it to the first thing you read on a website, for example.
That's a great point. Another audience question that came in ahead of time via email. We've actually talked a lot about the importance of social media on this webinar, but one of our audience members asked about strategies for reaching customers who are not tech savvy, things that may be beyond social media that small business owners should be thinking about in order to stay in touch with customers. Chris, I might throw that one to you. Do you have any thoughts on that?
On keeping in touch with customers?
Yes, beyond social media. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, what we do is when people have placed an order and then they come and pick it up, or we use Uber for delivery, sometimes we would put some information flyer inside the package to be able to keep in contact with customers, let them know what we're doing. And so that's one of the strategies that we used to keep in contact with them.
That's a great point. Craig, I want to ask you the same question, actually. Do you have any thoughts beyond social media and digital channels for keeping in touch with your customers?
Traditional customer service for us has been key. I mean, we have seen great response just with our customer service team and responding to emails in a timely manner and being solutions driven. I think social media is great for outreach and an input, but there are challenges and there are inquiries that need to be handled in a timely manner. And we've tried to really put a old school spin on it and just be responsive and timely.
That's great. Another audience question we received was how important branding is going to be for small businesses in a post-COVID world. I'm wondering, Ray, if I could throw that to you, because I know that you work with such a wide variety of businesses in your work. How important do you think branding is going to be for some of those local businesses going forward?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm certainly no marketing and brand expert, but I think over the last 5 years, what I've learned is that it's really just about authenticity. And I used to have this perception of, you invent some brand about yourself or something aspirational, but I think it really is, your brand is obvious through all the things you do. If you care about customers, then, I think as Craig pointed out, respond in a timely way. And so your brand is not some fancy images on your webpage. It is, your actions, the speed at which you serve your customers and how much you care. So what I would say is focus less, this is not something you need to go pay an agency to do. This is just decide what your values are and make sure your actions reflect that, and that is your brand. It is who you already are, not something that has to be invented.
That's a great point. And Ray, I want to throw another audience question to you, actually. Someone asked, they're interested in knowing if social distancing is here for the long term, or if it's just a short-term tool to contain virus transmission. I know that this is something that you have been thinking a lot about at Ritual. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, we think, it depends when we talk about long term, what time frame that really means. In our world, 12 months is long term. And I think the challenge with, so I think we can say fairly, reasonably confidently that some form of social distancing will be in place for at least 9 to 12 months, because until there is, without getting into like the medical side of this, unless there's a cure or some other fundamental change in medical capacity, if people are still worried about this, we just don't see crowded arenas and music festivals coming back anytime soon. So most offices are talking about operating at 50% capacity. You're talking about restaurants operating at 50% capacity. So again, the world won't look like it does today. It will open up, but it's certainly not going to look like it did 3 months ago. And we think we're going to live in some form, whether that's social distancing or social bubbling or whatever it is, the point is that there will be restrictions on human contact, probably not as strict as they are today, but certainly not no restrictions. And we think that's going to be for realistically 9 to 12 months. And it's hard to predict what happens beyond that, because when you have such structural changes to society for a year, I think what we can say confidently is that it's not going to go back to the way it was before anytime soon. And that if it does, it'll be a very slow transition back. A good example is there are many companies now who, as a result of not having people in an office for 12 months, are going to have permanent changes to office space, and are talking about actually making work from home a permanent thing. And many companies have done that already. So it's clear that when something lasts for 9 or 12 months, there will be permanent structural changes. It's just hard to predict beyond 12 months, I think.
Yeah, great points. Thank you. We have another audience question. This is a very practical question. We have a small business owner asking, how can I attract more people to my website? This business owner finds they get great conversion rates once people are actually there, but they're wondering about strategies to attract people. Chris, I imagine this is something that comes up in your teaching all the time. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that subject.
Yeah, for sure. It's good to be able to think about the audience that you're talking about and be able to come up with great content that really resonates with them. So in my consulting company, Master Entrepreneur, I put up a meme with Elon Musk looking up into the sky because of the SpaceX that was just launched a couple of days ago. And so that received a lot of engagement, and it really resonated with the clientele that I deal with. And so I'm always looking at the type of content that I'm sharing, ensuring that it does communicate the brand in terms of what we stand for, and I find that it becomes shareable, and people share it online, like it, and I find that attracts much more people that fits our ideal client profile to our website, and then from there we're able to then convert them into a 90-minute consulting strategy session, and then into a longer-term client.
That's great. Craig, I might throw the same question to you. Any advice to other small business owners on how to get people to that website?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think this is the debate that we face on a daily basis, as well as you've got your traditional customer that you envision, and you have to do all your marketing assessments in advance to understand who's your target market, and then from there you have to build a plan. And at that point it gets to be difficult because there's a lot of options in front of you. So I think you certainly need to hit on the SEO components to drive traffic to your website, and that is a very complex technical piece that I can't speak to, but I know that we have people that we've hired to explore that, and it's not cheap, but it's there's some return on your investment when it comes to SEO. And then you have to get creative with your approach. I think whether it's a neighborhood or a community, you have to get involved in anywhere there's outreach, and understand whether it's the back of a bus or on a bus stop, or, I mean, we're getting creative here with everything, and a little guerrilla marketing mixed in with traditional can't hurt anybody. So we believe in being massively active, and that's kind of hitting every single corner, and assessing your costs as it relates to all these things. But put a plan together and work to execute it. And I think the thing that you'll find is that there's endless ideas as it relates to how to target in the marketing space. It's just, what's the return and how much time are you spending on it? So that's where we sit.
That's great. Thank you. I want to pass this question around to a few of our panelists. We're getting an audience question about how to support employees and keep them engaged through the crisis. Obviously, all of you are dealing with very different situations in terms of your response to this crisis, but everyone has a base of employees who's dealing with a lot of stress and uncertainty as it relates to all of this. So I'm wondering how you're dealing with this on your teams. Tricia, can I start with you on that? This has been a busy time for Purolator, but how are you supporting your staff?
Well, we had a flex just before the March break. We put everybody at home for inside sales. And traditionally, the inside sales teams thrives off being with people and, talking about the sale and closing the deal and all of those great things. And then they had to go to their home office and be home permanently. And it was a change. And we used a lot of technology. We're using Teams as our number one opportunity to have those face-to-face conversations. We're getting really used to looking at ourselves on the camera, which is never ideal, but we're doing that. But we're also touching base on it from different levels. I will reach out to my team. My VP reaches out to my team. We're trying to just keep connected, but we also like to do some causes together. Like Purolator is passionate about Tackle Hunger. We try to raise money for local food banks, and my team has been putting a strategy together just to support the community, take away those, $20 you used to spend on Tim Hortons. Now you can donate that to the food bank. And a lot of that helps them, give them that thrive to win and believe that we're not just supporting Canadians get the products to where they need to go, but we're also supporting Canadians in different ways as a corporation. So I think it's a lot of different touch points and being really flexible. And it's really tough I really feel for women with children, being the sole home taker, being the teacher, being the meal prep, all of those things, and balancing a job if they're lucky enough to have a job. So being flexible is what I would suggest to anybody right now.
That's a great point. Ray, I want to throw the same question over to you.
Yeah, we've had to adjust with to all of our employees working from going to a full work from home model over the last 60 days. So I think we've done a few things. One is just encouraged a lot of flexibility. So when people are spending so much time at home, just letting them know that to really get settled into this new way of working, and fortunately for us, our employees don't there's a lot of flexibility on the hours and when they decide to do their work. So just giving them the flexibility to prioritize other things during working hours if they need to, as long as they are able to get their work done. That was one. I think the second is just for allowing community groups to form within the company for people to share tips on what has been working for them and what hasn't. So I think we're just really encouraging a free flow of internal conversation because none of us have really been through this before, and I think it's one of those we're all in this together and figuring it out together. And I think what we're trying to encourage people to think about is this is not when this first started. I think another panelist said this at the beginning. Some of us thought this was maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and then we thought maybe it was 2 or 3 months. It's very clear now that for many of us that we may not be back in an office till September or likely the end of this year. And so if it's going to be that long, this is not some temporary thing that you can just try to get through and survive. We still have to figure out how to do our best work and really sort of settle into this new norm. So I think that's really what we're trying to encourage people to think about and just figure out how to structure their life and work to make that happen.
That's great. Craig, I'm throwing the same one over to you.
Yeah, a bit of a different world from Tricia and Ray. So being an essential service, we've kind of locked ourselves down, and we've had to have some really challenging discussions just as far as safety is concerned, and that's been at the forefront. And we've had to adapt our business and bring in plexiglass screens and decals on floors to remind folks for social distancing. And I'm not wearing a mask right now, but I'm in a room on my own, and everyone in this building has to wear a mask when they come in, and every team member has to take their temperature, and we log their temperatures. So it's been challenging. Everyone's on board because I think they all feel very grateful to have a job at this time. But safety is first and foremost in our organization, and we need to make sure that everyone is safe. And there's risk to ourselves. There's risk to the team members and the team members' families. So, I think what worked well for our team, I think, is the fact that they knew that, I don't have anything going on. Typically, I'm not visiting friends or family this weekend. So you can rest assured that I'm going home and I'm going to, basically my second home is my work. And it's worked out well. We're very lucky, and it's been challenging, especially early on when the communication from the regulatory authorities wasn't necessarily very clear for us. So lots of learnings, and I feel like for us, communication was certainly the most important part to get through this. And I think it's going to continue, as Ray's pointed out, the timing here, it's unknown. So we're going to have to continue operating the way we are for the time being.
That's great. And very briefly, Chris, any other thoughts on that question about supporting employees?
Yeah, very much so. The whole pandemic has created a lot of uncertainty for a lot of people, not only the family, but the workplace and your employees. And so I found that we've had regular meetings, letting staff know where things are at. They've asked us if there's going to be any changes with some government. Many times we're like, we're not sure. We're still waiting to hear what happens. And I found that throughout this time, it's very important to provide leadership and be able to be positive, let people know where things are at. We're transparent with the operation of the business, profitability perspective. They know what's going on, and we're providing that leadership, and we're saying this is how we're moving forward. This is what we're doing. Even though at times you're thinking, when will this end or what's going to happen? You still need to be able to provide that leadership, and I think your staff are really looking towards you to be able to provide that leadership for them.
Absolutely. We'll have to end it there on a great point. On behalf of the Globe and Mail, I would like to thank our speakers for joining us today, and I'd like to thank all of you for listening and participating. Everyone who registered for the webinar will receive a link to the recorded version in about a week or so. Thank you again, and enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.